So I'm going to present in English, but you can ask me questions in Swedish. I can also answer in Swedish, but I thought a room full of Swedish people and me talking 20 minutes in Swedish is not what I want to do today. So you have to live with a German accent in English, not in Swedish. Hi. I will go on from the keynote. I could have been one of the interviewed people, I think, and I feel one of the desperate ones, but we will see. Because I'm going to present to you a bit about the experience that we had at GRIDH, where I'm working, with our server migration. And to give you give you a bit of context about me. So I worked at universities and different libraries with GLAM institutions mainly for some years now, and mostly aggregation and cultural heritage projects, so infrastructure projects. And now since 2024, I'm working as a research engineer at GRIDH. GRIDH stands for Gothenburg Research Infrastructure and Digital Humanities. And they basically, or we do, help researchers to come with the application, come with the ideas, and we help them build software for it. Have nice web services online. And you can see many of them down there, the screenshots. And the challenge behind this came recently, in the beginning of the year, because the virtual machines where these shiny projects run on were at the end of their support. So the life cycle was over. So we had 40 projects that needed to move, and they needed to move fast. And we couldn't just upgrade them. We couldn't just upgrade the operating system because we had, of course, also, as GRIDH has developed over the years, 10 years now already, has also kind of older system. And it might not be old if it's 10 years, but in software, this can be old. So we knew some of these projects wouldn't run on the new servers if we wouldn't make an effort to upgrade them. And then there was also the problem that, people come and go, especially in projects that are limited time. A researcher comes, or maybe also a developer comes into a project, does the projects, and then they leave. And if this is combined with very little documentation, then it's a really hard task to migrate a project to a new server. Because you have to become kind of a software archaeologist to find out how it works and what's the content, even if that's not quite clear from the text. So I had a lot of questions then during this migration, of course. Really, should we keep all of these projects even? Because some of them didn't have funding anymore. And we thought about which projects are maybe easy to migrate and why are they easy to migrate? And which are the ones that are really expensive? And what is it actually that gives a project a long life? And I also want to make the disclaimer, I don't have all the answers, but I really want to talk about this because, like I said, I'm one of the desperate ones. And this needs to be addressed because the migration, of course, took way longer than expected. Because we really have a lot of different software tools that we combined over the years. And especially this legacy software that I talked about that was a bit older, was a bit tougher. And in the early days of GRIDH, it was also sometimes, also from the funding side, not really clearly defined what would happen after the project funding runs out. So what's happening to the project then? What's happening to the data? What's happening to the tool? Should we keep the service running or not? And also the data hosting, something that I want to talk about later because it's tough to have all the backups, everything working again on the new servers, that everything is fine and safe and sound. But what we also did with some of these projects, and this is important to talk about, I would say it's that we really took some of them down, but we just took them down which doesn't mean they completely died, because we usually try to do backups instead, like minimized versions of them. And we also try to find a bit of more creative ways to keep projects alive, but not have an active service running. What we also did is that we harmonized the file structure. And I guess everyone knows that on your own computer, that when you don't put a file in a certain folder that you always put it, you will never find it again. Or maybe you do, but later. And it was the same for our virtual machines. Many different people working with it. People put files everywhere. And in our migration, we really tried to reorganize the whole thing to be able to find stuff again. And the most important thing that we learned from this is also that we documented all of that, what we did, for the next poor person who in 10 years will do the same thing again, probably. So examples for projects that worked really well. I have one example down there, for example, which is QueerLit, that you will maybe hear more about tomorrow by my colleague Siska, who will also present here. It's projects that are well documented, because, then I, as a developer, have easy way to find out, what should I do here? How can I run this thing? When they are maintained and not already crumbling, like when someone already took care of it in down the line. It's also sometimes, in QueerLit's case, it was a more complex project, but at least all the parts were documented and well explained, so it was easy to move it. But of course, also the simple projects are easy to move. Then it's good if projects are not too handcrafted. That means it's better if software has a strong community, if it's a very common one, people use it. Then there's a community that you can ask, even if someone else is already somewhere else. And then, which is also maybe an interesting aspect, those projects with high quality data, those that had fair data, because in that case, someone already made these thoughts. Like they thought about, how can we make this data accessible to someone else? How can we share the data? So there is clear right statements usually. There's like a way to access it, and it's maybe even already shared with the world, so it's not as bad if we don't have it anymore. And then about the projects where we had problems because they were not funded anymore. One example is that we had some legacy WordPress sites. And they usually have the problem that people use plugins, and plugins are sometimes not supported anymore, or there are other like themes that are not supported anymore. And WordPress is, of course, a site that is very, very much online. So it's like when half the internet is WordPress sites, it's an easy target for hackers. So it was a problem with those. And what we did instead for this one is that it's now instead a LaTeX file. And we can generate a PDF from it with 400 pages. And it still says, has some functionality from the old WordPress site, because there it was also only static content, that it now can still have hyperlinks where you can, for example, jump to a topic in the PDF, or you can jump to an author, or similar approaches. So there we have still, we now have our researcher, or our researcher now has this PDF and can maybe generate a book from it with 400 pages. So this was at least a nice solution for that one, and we don't have to have the service running anymore. But the data is safe. Then we also had other legacy services, which are now just static one-pagers with our contact info. So in case someone still wants this project, we still have it. We still have a minimized backup, so people can still use it. And during this process, we also asked ourselves, how fair are we at the moment? I was surprised that we were still quite fair, but I have to make a difference between the older and the newer projects, obviously, because maybe fair also became more of a thing later on. We already use in many projects UUIDs, and we always, or almost always, also have API interfaces so that the data is accessible. to machines or to people. We use metadata standards where possible and controlled vocabularies. And we use them like internationally. We don't create usually our own kind of standards or controlled vocabularies. You know, this famous comic where we made the next standard. We don't do that. We use those that are existing and out there. Exactly. Then we also share our data if possible via OEI, for example, to Samsung. And we also usually have quite rich metadata because they come of the context from research. Also, sometimes we work together with librarians in libraries. So the data is usually quite rich in that case. But there's still a lot we need to do so that more of our projects live up to these standards and that we can also improve more in joining forces when it comes to that, like really help also to make the vocabularies, for example, better. And yeah, share what we do. And one thing now that the migration is done would probably also be to maybe make more a data hub of GRIDH, to really not have all these silos, but maybe have also one point where people can come to and get all the data easily. That's at least something that is in my mind at the moment. What we also did during this process is that we started to use the data management software that we use in our projects, which is OmikaS. We used it for our own projects. So we documented our project management within OmikaS. And we use this as well to also generate our website. And so we're always up to date with like the newest projects going on and yeah, can present it there. To sum it up a bit more, documentation is important. I think I stressed it quite enough now. Then it's also, like I said, very important to define what happens if a project is done. What is it really with the maintenance and storage? Like, how should we do that? Clear licensing is needing because to also know, are we allowed to do this? So this is really, for the newer projects, this is more in space now, but for before it was a bit harder to see. Then our software jungle, that we keep it a bit smaller if possible, and don't just use stuff because it's cool, because this is never a good reason. Also because of this trending things, because sometimes when a software is trending, then it might also disappear as fast as it came. So it's better to use also software that has these kind of long-term stable versions so that you can use like a stable version and you know it will last for a while and not disappear very, very soon. Exactly. Join forces. I will come back to the join forces part later. But more about software. So I noticed it's very good if you have time also when you plan a project to look around if there's maybe already an existing solution, because that's when people usually start handcrafting solutions because they didn't find anything. So they think, I will build this now. But then very often when you're done with your building, you find, oh, but there is that software that I missed. It's the one that I needed and everyone is using it. And yeah, but now you already have and you work 3 years on it. So about the data storage, and I don't know, I have the feeling, I asked many people in Sweden about this, and I get so many mixed answers. So I need help with this, I would say. I mean, we get a lot of help from the university when it comes to data hosting, and we have all these nightly backups and all of that. But you know, I want Nestor for Sweden, or Digis, or Rada. I don't know, all German things. But you know, a group of people, they know long-term storage is the thing, and we know exactly how we do it. That would be nice. Maybe it's out there, but I maybe don't know them. Then a bit more about the other factors, which are more on the project management side, I would say. if you want to make wise decisions and documents them, you need time, you need more buffers to actually do them. And I'm very happy that I'm in this position, thanks to our management, that I have a permanent position, because if you usually are like not permanently employed, then you come for your project, you do your project, it will be very shiny and fancy, but it might not last, because you go to the next position and do something else. But if you are stuck with this project for a while because you're permanently employed, you think about it more, I would say. And teamwork is key. Sharing knowledge, of course, because all of my colleagues also have permanent positions. So it's easier to share our knowledge. It's easier to talk to each other. It's easier to distribute the knowledge. So if someone goes, the other one still knows it. And of course, it's very good that everyone is here today, so you can make other allies too at Digikult. I also can recommend the mailing list code that came out recently, where I also think there's good discussions there already when you want to talk more about these kind of digital problems. And now comes my controversial point. When you work in projects like that are very short funded, my opinion at least is that you should focus on the data and not the tools, because the tools basically come and go. And I heard that from so many people in GLAM institutions that I worked with, who had like tools from the 80s and I don't know, like these old things that produced data, but the data is still there. The data, they migrated to the next one and next one. Hello? So the data is still there, but maybe not the tools, and this is fine. I would say maybe use the tools to make the data as good as possible, to make it as fair as possible, share it with other people, but really try to plan enough time for it. And I can't talk about sustainability without talking about the climate too. So storage of data and also working with data in general and websites come with a lot of emissions. So what we also did during the migration is that we deleted what was no longer needed, because we had a lot of redundancy in the data also, because people made a backup here, made a backup there. We just took the stuff that was really needed, and if we were unsure about it, we at least minified it, so it doesn't take as much space anymore. We tried to reduce what was possible and optimized our code also, let every query that comes to the server is a bit not that heavy anymore. And I started to ask people if it really needs to be 3D, if it really needs to be AI. Because I know AI is cool at the moment and it's trending, but AI also needs a kind of amount of data to make sense. Like if it's 100 images, you can basically do it manually, or at least with a smaller script, but you don't need AI for this. So what I did not talk about is money and politics, because this is not my area of expertise, but I still think, I hope that you gain something from this, or at least you now know the questions you should ask people like me, like developers, if you make decisions. I also didn't talk about IT security, even though I think this is very important in this sense. And that's why I also put on my head as part of the program committee of SWIP. SWIP is Semantic Web and Libraries. We talk a lot about linked open data. And this year, it's open, free, online. So you can just register and you are in it. And the keynote is about exactly that. It's about library resilience, because my colleagues in Cologne made it happen that we have Brewster Kahle as our keynote speaker, and he is the founder of the Internet Archive, and he will talk about getting sued, cyber attacks, censorship, all these topics that would be so interesting in this content that I don't have time for. as I said, I don't have all the answers, but I'm really looking forward to hear thoughts on this. So thank you.
Yay. Och vi har ju 3,5 minut faktiskt som ni ska få möjlighet att ställa frågor till Julia. Så ta chansen nu. Det är som man flåsar den här mikrofonen hela tiden. Ja. Fire away.
Som sagt också gärna på svenska. Det är okej.
Exakt. Och hon har inte alla svaren så man vet inte vad det blir för svar, eller hur? Ja. Björn har en fråga från nätet, ska vi se.
I really like the idea of the Swedish version of Nestor. That would be very helpful.
Agreed. I'm still hoping that someone in the audience, but there is already. I don't know.
Could you please explain a little bit more about Nestor? How does it work?
I'm also not too knowledgeable about this, but I just know there are people out there talking about long-term stable archiving. So it's really about digital archiving and finding formats and solutions that work for a longer time and keep them safe.
Jag har en fråga längst bak och sen har vi en fråga från dig, Björn. Vad fantastiskt. Inte online.
Visst menar du mig, Lisa?
Ja. Jag ser inte det för jag har de här underbara
Jag ser ingenting.
Min fråga är, vad tyckte projekten vars projekt inte blev migrerade i en användbar form? Liksom, tyckte de att det var okej att bara datan behölls minimalt? Liksom?
Ja. Alltså vi frågade dem också faktiskt.
Ja, såklart.
Men det var ju också oftast så att de hade också moved on. Alltså att de hade också andra projekt nu. De var ju bara glada att på något sätt, alltså för projektet fick ju pengar. Alltså det är inte, det är ju sorgligt att man måste låta dem dö. Så ja, så vi pratade med alla och de var fine med det faktiskt. Speciellt också nu i form av den pdf-en till exempel. Man har ju något kvar. Och vi har också den är ju maskinläsbart. Så ifall att det blir ett projekt till någon gång kan vi ju få ut det igen och göra en databas av det hela.
Tack för en jättebra föreläsning. Väldigt konkreta, handfasta tips. Jag hade en fråga om det här med klimataspekterna. När ni tog upp det med forskarna, hur reagerade de? Var det liksom positivt eller blev de så här, nej men vi vill ha AI? Eller hur var reaktionerna?
Ja, det är en bra fråga. Alltså det är fortfarande en diskussion kan man säga. Alltså jag fattar ju att man vill använda AI och jag är inte emot det alls. Alltså jag använder det också för programmering i min vardag ibland. Alltså det är inte så att jag motstår helt. Men det är en bra diskussion ändå att ha. Alltså också med forskarna att det är okej. Att just det, man kan ju göra så här också. Ibland är det också bara att man inte vet. Att det kanske finns en annan enklare lösning egentligen.
Vi måste ha en mikrofon för att annars hör inte de som är online.
Nej, jag jobbar med Julia. Jag kan ju säga det också att vi säger nej till forskarna. Det är ganska ofta när de föreslår AI-lösningar. Och då handlar det väldigt ofta om att man tänker att det är just coolt. Men förstår inte hur enormt mycket data som det behövs. Så att det helt enkelt är en praktisk omöjlighet.
Vi har en sista fråga här framme innan vi ska lämna över till nästa programpunkt.
Så jättespännande föredrag. Jag såg du nämnde en del om att använda sig av kodbaser eller mjukvara som har en stor community kring sig. Finns det saker vi kan lära oss från den, om man säger open source community-byggandet in i kulturarvskontext eller digital humanities i brett? Att vi kan också bli bättre på det.
Ja, det är faktiskt en bra tanke. Alltså jag tror det ändå. Att man kan. Alltså jag märker ju, det finns ju ganska stora kulturarvscommunity redan i open source-världen. Alltså om det gäller SWIP till exempel, alltså det är jag själv också med i. Det är en stor community av folk som jobbar med kultur faktiskt i bibliotek. Sen finns det ju också den där Code for Lib, också för library. Jag kan nog mer om biblioteksvärlden, men det finns ju olika grupper och vi kan säkert också lära oss från deras workflow. Den här mikrofonen försvinner ibland.
Ja, det är mest spännande så.
Ja. Ja, men jag kan inte ge exakt, men jag ska fundera under dagen om det finns fler workflows vi kan ta över där kanske.
Vi tackar dig så hemskt mycket, Julia, och med en liten applåd.